And we're live. Welcome to Music Matters with Jason Tramm, and thank you so much for being a part of our unique podcast community, where we explore the triumphs and challenges of the performing arts world as seen through the eyes of distinguished artists. And thank you so much for helping us grow. We hit 1,915 subscribers, and we grow every day thanks to people like you. Please share our videos if you like them, and smash that bell icon and subscription icon on YouTube. And to find out more about our show, to see our almost 300 past episodes, check out our website at www.jasontram.net. Again, that's www.jasontram.net. We have a great show today. We have Matthew Vickers, a star tenor on the rise, and a really great guy. And so excited he can be here today, and he's got a lot of great things to tell us. So welcome, Matthew.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Oh, it was great to meet you on the Giulietta A. Romeo production in New York with Teatro Graticello, and I just amazed by your stamina. That's a crazy role.
Yeah, that was something else. That was a super fun experience. That was my first time working in New York, and as we were rehearsing down in Battery Park City. Shout out to them, Battery Park City Parks Authority.
They were lovely. What nice people too. And I mean, the people from the Battery Park, they were lovely to work with. And
yeah, they really were.
And Stephanos, of course, is a good friend of mine. He's been on the show like 4 times.
Oh, has he?
Oh, yeah.
Shout out to Stephanos too.
Yeah, great guy. He's doing
thanks for giving me that opportunity.
Terrific work, and he is very good about scouting excellent talent.
He is. Well, he cultivates good friendships. I mean, a lot of places that I gravitate to work-wise are companies and places where they have a good circle of people. They work well together. You know, you can work well in the rehearsal space, and then you can go out for a drink together, and it's just fun coming back to those experiences. So I've already told Stephanos this. I hope he keeps me in that circle because, you know, I was staying, where the heck was I? I was staying in the Hell's Kitchen. And so I wake up, looking at the rehearsal schedule, like, okay, how do I want to get down there today? I could take the ferry, which would drop me off right at the rehearsal space, or I could rent a bike and ride a bike down the Greenway all the way down. It was amazing. It was like one of the best experiences I've had in New York.
And that view, just that park, we were there for the rehearsals. I'm like, look at the view. I'm looking at the Statue of Liberty. The sun's going down. It was about as gorgeous as it gets.
I kid you not. The last performance, when we're in the first act, when Eleni and I were up on the platform singing this really long, drawn out duet. Basically, Act 1 is like fight duet. It's just like a 30, 40-minute duet. And I was standing up there on this thing, and we're just standing out there looking at the Statue of Liberty all lit up. And it was a really surreal moment because I don't know how many artists, performers, and people struggle with this sort of thing, but it's really easy to get bogged down by the things that aggravate you, the things you have to put up with. I mean, there were helicopters flying over.
There were many helicopters, man. That was crazy. I was like, what the hell?
Like all week. It was like all week. It was like not a single helicopter. Friday night, 16 helicopters.
Small planes, helicopters, large planes. It was noisy.
The booze cruises going by, people cheering. So it was noisy. And I think it's easy for me to really get frustrated by that. You know, for me, it's always my personal battle has always been knowing how invested I get into something, and I want everyone to meet me at that level. I mean everyone. Like if you're on a booze cruise, you don't even know what opera is, but you're floating by an opera. You need to be in it as much as I am, and that's been my personal battle. And so it was this really cool moment I had. We were up there, and we couldn't hear the monitor super well, and we were really clued in with Maestro and really hyper focusing. And I don't know if you know this, but her and I are standing on like a 6-inch, maybe 7-inch little wedge platform to raise us up a little bit.
Oh, wow.
So we couldn't move really at all. So I'm like bracing onto the railing, and my calves are locked in. And
I saw so little. I was backstage with the chorus. The chorus never stopped singing off stage on that show for some reason, and I spent most of the time back there just kind of hanging out. And I would sneak out and catch when the beginning of Act 3, or catch moments and then run backstage and catch the chorus again. But the
cool thing about that set and where you were is you really didn't have to move a whole lot to be able to see it from the back, and you could see right through it. You could see right through the set. So that must have been, I know for me, that was cool. I stood back there because we didn't have, dressing rooms, we didn't really have a segregated area where, where you have maybe monitors. So part of the cool thing of that experience was like when you showed up, you were pretty much on the whole time, and that was cool. I mean, I remember in between my two entrances in Act 3, I'd stand because I'd come off on stage left and I had to come around, wait on stage right, and the dancers were up there doing something, and I'd stand there and wait with the other guy who I was entering with. And when the dancers all came out, I did like the baseball game, like good game line, and I was just trying to keep everybody's energy up because everybody was carrying so much. I mean,
everyone was so excited about it, and they worked so hard. It was quite a production and challenging music. I mean, some of the most challenging music I've seen in a long time. I mean, everything was just hard, top to bottom.
It really was, and the thing that I think was on a lot of people's lips after the show was it primed people to want to see like a full in-house production of that. And I think that's a really good testament to not only the work we did, but the work that Stefanos and Greticello and Battery Park did. I mean, I know people enjoyed that experience, but it really got people thinking like, wow, okay, that was really interesting, and it was really cool and edgy, and they did great digital effects and stuff. And then I heard a lot of people be like, yeah, I'd love to also see it full production, in-house with what can be done in the house too. So I think that's a good.
I was doing my research on the show, and I don't think it's ever been performed fully staged in New York. I think that was as close as it's come in the Manhattan to being fully staged.
Really?
I know.
I thought it had.
It was done in Carnegie Hall with Eve Queller's group, but that was a concert.
Okay.
In the 80s.
Oh, in the 80s. I thought it had been done in the 40s, but I don't remember the research I did on it. And
what's it like being the only person probably in the Northern Hemisphere who would know that role? I was like, you better not get sick because.
I know. I mean, I had a cover, but he had a role, and then I'm sure he had a cover too. And I've been in productions like that where the cover's kind of, it's like circular cover, so you can't get totally sick because then you have to cover the cover of that. You're gonna be in some bit role even though you're sick. To be completely honest, and this isn't something I ever chose, or raised my hand and said, "Oh, I'll do it." I have a number of roles like that were either world premieres or have never been done or aren't done anymore for whatever reason. So there's a handful of roles that I have done and still know that I talk about, like, hey, you guys, if you're looking for something cool to do, because I know a lot of companies are branching out, trying to get interesting, and that's not what they're trying to do. That's a very general, horrible way of saying it. They're trying to get interesting. No.
Delving into the rep.
Yeah,
Deep.
they're expanding. They're expanding the repertoire. They're expanding how they communicate with their audiences. We'll say that. I can't speak for what they're trying to do. But that was, I don't want anybody to hear that and be like, oh, he just thinks they're trying to be interesting.
Oh, certainly interesting. When I find that the lesser known masterworks certainly shed light on the famous ones. So like when you look at Puccini, which was the generation after, or the generation before Zandonai, you see like, there's glimpses of that, but it's like the next step further.
Well, I think you and I had this conversation at Battery Park at the rehearsal space about how we sort of, and then I'm going to speak in a generality here, so please forgive me, generality, please. But we get kind of lost in this the canonic notion. We're like, oh, dude, these are the masterpieces, and this was what we do. And we were talking about new works, and we were talking about how the trend that I feel, and this may or may not be accurate, but I feel like we write a new thing and it's great because it's new, and that it's not a guarantee. I mean the opera. I mean they were writing hundreds and hundreds of operas every year. That Verdi came out with his one or his two. And so you had this volume of work, and that's how I think things can rise to the top because you have something to float on. And then at the same time, you have things that sort of get lost. I mean, why does Zandonai kind of get lost into obscurity? I mean, his music is fantastic. That score was very reminiscent of another Italian composer Montemezzi, who wrote the Love of Three Kings, which I've also done, which doesn't get done very often.
I prepared the chorus for that in Carnegie Hall. Yeah, that's another interesting work. Yeah, there. Yeah, and those masterworks certainly like they shed light on like the other Verismo composers, the other great ones like the like Cav Pags, and you see where those come from. It's so hard.
Yeah.
I think it was so hard to sustain like long scale the Verismo idiom because it's so fiery and so passionate that to make it long scale was very hard to sustain it.
Absolutely. No, I can't even imagine. But it is funny though, how many of us in the like the Sitzprobe and in the performance and stuff, we'd hear these excerpts and be like, oh, that sounds just like Tosca, or that sounds just like there was a Manon Lescaut moment, and there was a butterfly moment, and there were all these things, and we're like, oh, that sounds just like Puccini, because they were writing very nearly the same time.
Lots of Strauss was mixed in there in the orchestration, certainly. Yeah, it's fascinating music. So did you always know you wanted to be a singer? Did you know you wanted to be an artist?
That's an interesting question. Because if you ask my mom, it's a very different answer. It's a definitive yeah.
We're going to phone a friend. We'll call up your mom.
Yeah, call my mom. You want to have an interesting conversation, you're talking to the wrong guy. My mom is really the one to go to. Yes and no. I say the no part is because I was an awful student. I mean, if any of my teachers are out there watching this, I know they're not, because why would they? Not for you, for me, for the
you
me.
Never know who watches these things.
I was
always
a horrible
surprised.
student. And I was a little directionless. I mean, I didn't have this sort of blazoning passion to be like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to be a performer. That's all I want with my life. At a young age, I didn't really have that. I mean, I went to college because my dad was like, all right, you're done high school, you're going to college. And I was like, okay, so I'll go here. And
you study music?
And that's where I went. I did study music. So I had a really well-rounded childhood. I'm really, really grateful to my parents that they encouraged everything. They didn't say no.
Were they professional musicians?
No, not by a long stretch. My mother is musical. She played, piano for her church for many, many years, but
so did mine.
But has a lot of performance anxiety. She never got paid for it or anything like that. It was all volunteer.
My mom too.
And
that's sweet.
Yeah, that's a common thing.
There's something special about that, isn't there? Like, it's like had the love of it, but and took me to a lot of shows, but never, my dad wasn't. He worked at a power plant. But my mom certainly loved music, and she liked opera, but not like she wasn't a fanatic, and they didn't go all the time. But it's amazing kind of how life guides you.
I mean, it's extraordinary. I mean, I didn't discover opera until I was in college. I mean, I didn't know anything about it except that it was, what the large women with horns on their heads sang. I mean, I literally believed that stereotype, that paradigm about it. And so I had this well-rounded childhood, and right before high school, I broke a bone. I broke my leg before moving into high school. And so I wasn't playing competitive sports right before high school. So it took me
What were your sports?
I lost that edge. I played baseball, basketball, soccer, and hockey. Hockey was my favorite. I loved hockey. We didn't have football at my schools, so I never got into football. Which hockey's rough. But I loved playing sports. I loved baseball. Baseball and hockey are my two top sports.
Who was a big hockey player? Franco Pomponi he was a big hockey player.
Is he?
He was, yeah.
I didn't know that. I should.
He wanted to be a pro hockey player. That was his thing too. I love that.
I did too. Before I got to high school, that's what I wanted. I thought I was going to be a pro hockey player, and a skateboarder. I was also into skateboarding, and I'm still into skateboarding, but not so much because I'm terrified of hurting myself again.
Get to my age, I'm 47. I'm like, I don't want to. I go skiing, but I'm like, I got to be careful. I don't want to be in traction for 6 months and cancel all my work.
That's the thing. I don't want to risk losing a contract or inhibiting, what I do at all. I'm really into running. I've been a runner since I was 18, and last season on a gig. It had some weird pain in my, I forget which tendon it is, but a tendon in my ankle, and I was really upset because I hadn't really done anything to it. It was just sort of overused at the moment. And I love running, and I was on a gig, so I was limiting my movement and stuff like this. I couldn't, stand up super easily and all this stuff. And so I'm hyper aware of, I should go out and go skating today, or I should head to the park and, and I'm like, well, I have a gig in 6 months. I don't want to twist my ankle or break my arm or something.
I had a guest on the show. He's a world famous fiddle player from Oklahoma. He's like the Oklahoma Music Hall of Fame, and this guy is like he's been like 40 countries as a part of the American State Department playing fiddle music, and he's classically trained violinist too. Anyway, one of his things, he was a semi-professional skateboarder, and he used to come on the stage on a skateboard playing the fiddle.
Oh, that's amazing.
He was like, wow, Mike, that's crazy.
At a stage, wow, that's slick.
That's how he made his debut at the Grand Ole Opry when he was like 20.
On a skateboard, man. I wish I could have done that.
He said he was in Thailand once and he did that and he hit a bump and he went flying and he broke his violin.
That's insane. That's tragic.
That's why I love these stories. And he's like, the State Department and the Thai government got me another violin to play on the tour. Sweet.
Man, well, that's why I don't. I mean, I wish I could say that I could throw caution to the wind and just do all the things.
Some stage directors are going to hear this, and you're going to be in a skateboard and an opera's coming up.
I hope so. To all my director friends out there, let's make it happen. I'm totally fine with that. I can rollerblades. I played roller hockey for years. I can do all kinds of things.
How does your physical background help you as a career as a singer?
Another interesting question. I mean, I don't think it's a complicated answer. I think the answer is it does. I mean, it's very physical what we do. Some of the things that directly I think correlated. I took jiu-jitsu for a number of years. Never took it real high. It was sort of like a casual thing, but there were some fundamentals that you never leave you. So balance and stamina and support and these sort of things. Positioning and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's background is important, but nothing substitutes for just getting out there and just doing it and rehearsing and performing over and over again. It's really, endurance is the only thing that can build itself. It just takes time. You got to build it up, and you can do a lot of tertiary things. Gotten into yoga in the past couple of years and continue to run, stuff like that, and all of that aids. But unless you're putting on a full opera every day in your place, doing it 2 or 3 times in a day, you're still going to have to do that in the rehearsal space.
Absolutely, it's so physical. Being a singer, people don't realize how physical it is. Did the breathing come easy? Were you always a tenor? Did you make your debut as a tenor?
I did. Operatically, yes. So going back into my trajectory into opera, I mean, I started out singing the low bass parts. We're going back as far as middle school.
Sure.
When you're a kid and your voice just kind of drops. I started out as a bass 2, and then pretty soon I was moving up to bass 1. I was always naturally musical, so my choir directors were always putting me in the parts that could pick notes out because I could hear notes and I can read music pretty well, even just naturally without really being taught. So I got moved into bass 1 baritone level, and when I was in high school I was singing baritone, and I did all the choral competitions where you audition as a soloist, as an individual to be and I was the first person in my school to ever go to All Eastern, and it was largely just based on the fact that the men's pool is slightly lower than the women's. Obviously there's less competition, and I just had natural ability to pull notes out. So my sight reading was okay. It's not like I was a phenomenal singer that they were like, we gotta have him, but it just was, good enough to ride all those levels up and make it to All Eastern. And I got into more, I was always performing. I was always, playing sports and doing all kinds of choir and handbells. And I was in the orchestra, I was in the band, I was in all these things. I loved just performing. And when I got to high school, it sort of narrowed. I discovered stage plays and I discovered musicals. So Actually, I thought that I wanted to go to school to sing musicals. I thought I wanted to be on Broadway.
That is the gateway drug to a lot of American singers. Actually, most American singers have been on the show. The Europeans, not so much, but the Americans, musical theater is that gateway. This is your first exposure to staged musical art,
which is a great thing. I mean,
absolutely,
we want that exposure. But the other side of that coin, this is not meant to be a negative thing, but the other side of that coin is I didn't have exposure to opera, so I didn't even know that there was another avenue until I got to college. So the funny thing, the funny thing is, I auditioned for my undergraduate school as a baritone, and I auditioned using an aria from Don Giovanni. And I went into that first audition for the teacher that I wanted to study with, and he was like, finished. He was like, okay. First of all, he gave me some Italian notes because it was atrocious, and then he was like, also, you're a tenor, you're not a baritone. So that was my transition. I sang tenor too for a number of years, and pretty soon after that, moving. And we're talking choral parts right now, obviously.
Sure.
And moved my way up to the higher tenor ranges. And my first year at school, there was a regional opera company that reached out to us and used I think they had I think the director was new. I think that was his first year there. Who's now a friend and mentor of mine. But they used our school chorus and infused a kind of opera chorus, and that was my introduction. My first opera I ever heard, saw, and was in all at the same time was Pagliacci. And I was
a good place to start.
I mean, it really is. People always ask, what's a good opera for beginners? And that's always in my top 2 or 3.
I'm always like Verdi, Rigoletto, nothing like those Italian classics.
Absolutely. Bohème, I think, is a great intro. I think Pagliacci's great. It's a little shorter. Bohème moves. It's not like it's stale at any point. But I was villager number 1, who has the line.
You got the
He's
line.
Got the line. You watch out, dude. She's gonna go out there. You better. And he grabbed me by my suspenders, wearing suspenders, and I swear he lifted me off the ground. I mean, a little 18-year-old me. And I just remember all these thoughts going in my head. I'm just like hanging like a rag doll. He's singing in my face, and I just remember thinking, I love this. Oh, this is so cool.
Nothing like that getting bitten by the bug, the opera bug.
It was just all the things I loved about it. And that's sort of, so no, I didn't know that I wanted to do this. And even then I knew I liked opera, and I started to kind of pursue it. But I was, like I said, I was a terrible student. I was unfocused. I was kind of adrift, and I wanted to live my life. And so I paid a price a little bit for that now, but at the same time, it's, we are who we are. And so I didn't really know that I wanted to do this and that I could do this until I went to grad school. And I had a teacher who really helped me unlock my true voice and my true ability. And he also instilled in me that that burning for just absorbing not just knowledge, but experiencing all types of singers. And he showed me, and he didn't introduce me to YouTube, but he connected the dots of YouTube and, hey, there's a lot of old singers on here.
I mean, the kids of today, I teach undergraduates, so I'm always assigning them singers to listen to, because everything's there, but there's just so much of it. So someone's got to guide you through that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was stuck in this sort of my own making. I was stuck in this sort of box because I just joined the sort of opera community, and I was in grad school to do it. And it's really embarrassing because I remember, like, my first year in grad school, I was at lunch with some friends of mine, and we were, like opera singers do, we end up talking shop. I mean, that's kind of all.
Never.
Yeah, we never talk about music. And they were saying these things. They were saying things like tessitura and passaggio, and I was like, I don't know what any of that is. I may have been taught it, but I didn't retain it. And that was all on me. And so I was in this box of my own making of thinking that, the 3 tenors, Pavarotti and Domingo and Carreras, that was it. You had to pick one of the 3, because as everybody knows, you can't like all 3 of them. you have to only like the one.
That's so
That's what
funny.
everybody.
I
"Oh,
saw
like
the
that."
three tenors at Giant Stadium. My mom got me. That was when I was a freshman in college. That was the summer, and my mom got tickets for my birthday to go see the three tenors. We went. We sat in the skybox. We sat by like the lights, and it was like $100 of tickets at the time. We were stunned how expensive. It was like, what a show, though, man.
Yeah, I mean, I do sort of sort of bemoan the fact that I didn't really know who Pavarotti was until after he had passed.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, I
you
knew
can
the
only
sort of
live. You can only
connection.
live when you're planted, right? It's like I wish I could have
Absolutely.
heard Björling live. Yeah, I have a couple friends who heard him live, and I'm like, what was it like in the house to hear that voice?
Yeah, I mean, same. I know some people who've seen him, and they just said it was incredible. I mean, they had
The,
these
that
voices that were
pyramid
like,
voice that exploded at the top. Like,
yeah,
mm,
these voices and these personalities. And so, yeah, it wasn't until grad school I sort of was put on this path, and I discovered people like Bonasoli and Bartolini, and of course Giacomini.
I got to work with Lando Bartolini. What a great guy he was too.
We talked about that, didn't we? I remember you saying
Yep.
something about Lando, and Lando, like I know.
He was a lovely man. I don't know if he's still alive, but I just remember I was the chorus master for New Jersey State Opera, which I took over after Solpini died. But Lando comes in with his wife. He got into a car accident. His wife is screaming at him in Italian. And Solpini's like, take him, I'll take her. You take her, I'll take him. And we separated them. And he had to go on to do Trovatore.
My God. No, he's one of my favorites. And I call him Lando because I watch so many of his videos and I listen to so many of his recordings. I feel like I'm a nephew. Like, oh.
He's a very short gentleman, and he was lovely. But like the first rehearsal, he walked in. I had no idea that he was the star tenor. He didn't walk in like I'm the star tenor. He walked in like just a very friendly man, and we sat together. And then he opened his mouth. I'm like, whoa,
Yeah,
old school, man, old school.
I wish that I had. Yeah, I wish that I had been, like you said, sort of planted in that world sooner, and I could have known some of these things, and maybe had the opportunity to see some of these great performers. But yeah, in grad schools, we're not sort of.
Where'd you do your master's?
Penn State.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Shout out to Penn State.
Yeah. What's their mascot? Penn State.
Lions.
Nittany Lions. That's right. Very nice. Well, it's fascinating how everyone has their own path, and everything's got uniquely unique parts of it. There's no one way to get to anywhere, especially a performing career. We have people here who started super late. We have people here who are wunderkinds who've been doing it since out of the womb, and everyone's got their path, and they bring different things with them along the way.
Yeah, no, this is an interesting thing that I've been thinking about a lot because. Sort of moved out of the early phase of my career where you're constantly trying to prove yourself. You feel like everyone's, doubting you and of course this is stuff we just tell ourselves. Nobody's saying this. Like there isn't, a panel of people somewhere being like, we doubt. But you feel this energy, whether it's true or not. And so I've sort of moved out of that phase. And now I'm in this other phase where I feel like people expect more out of me. And that gives me anxiety. And I've also been watching a lot of.
You do sing some of the hardest roles in the repertoire. I was going through your list. I'm like, oh man, he does them all.
I've turned down some work in the past because it wasn't enough work. Like it wasn't hard enough. I'm weird. I remember
all in. I love that.
Who was I talking with? I don't remember who I was talking with, but I was lucky enough to do a run of Manon Lescaut, one of the longest tenor roles in this repertoire. And a fellow tenor of mine, heck was it? I'm not going to remember it, but it'll look like I'm name dropping anyway. He had also done it, and we were telling him about it. He's like, "Oh man, did you like?" And I'm like, "You know what? I love a show where I can just go out and be out there the whole time. I don't want to be in my dressing room. I don't want to be waiting for the next thing. I don't want to be. It's better for me if I can just get on stage and do it." And I think he differed. He would rather work a little less or work less hard. But I don't know. It's I like the challenging things. I don't know if it's just for myself or I want other people to. Maybe I realize do you have a therapy degree? I mean, because we could just talk about this now.
I I do a lot of church music, and a lot of the time I'm calming people down and getting them on the stage. I learned that from Silipini. Silipini was a master at getting people on the stage and relaxed.
Yeah.
He taught me that.
I mean, that's
He
important.
would look over and wink at the people. They would be calm, and some conductors get everyone nervous. That is such an everyone's got a hard enough job as it is. I learned that to always kind of make sure everyone's prepared, but then to be very, very accommodating and like we're in this together type of thing. And I think it's so important in this business.
We need to work together more often.
Definitely.
I like that approach.
I mean, the situations are hard enough, right? The music is hard enough. It's we approach classical music. It's like the hardest, most like the highest level of human emotion that you can have in the most extreme situations, and we put ourselves in that, right? As we put ourselves in those positions, and then the technical demands, of course, on top of it, and but there's nothing better than that. There's nothing more exciting than to get on the stage and give everything you got, and then walk away at night and say, you know what, I did best I could today.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd rather just go in and the same thing. It's like I've had work where like the rehearsal schedule's kind of all over the place, and then I've had some that are really succinct. And it's like if I'm going to come in and go somewhere and if I'm going to go there, I want to be there and I want to work. I want to work right away. I'll work all day. I don't care. That's fine. But my least favorite thing is they're really like spread out, like, oh, you're going to do 30 minutes here. You might do 2 hours here, and then maybe 1 hour at night. And that works for some people. Some people can have that lifestyle and they're super free, but I'm a very regimented sort of person. I like my structure and I need my comfort zone. And so it's like, once I leave the house, it's like, I'm ready to go back. So as soon as I can get back, that's what I'm looking forward to.
So we have a question from the audience. This is from Dana from Vermont, and she asks, she says, "What was your role debut?"
My role debut. This is a good story.
Besides Pagliacci, Villager number 1.
Yeah, I don't count that. Technically, yeah, I guess the Villager doesn't have a name. He's just Villager. Technically, my role debut was Parpignol in Bohème, but I was still in college.
I sang that myself when I was a kid. Before I went to conducting.
If you talk to the director of that show, my friend and mentor, he'll tell you he remembered me because I contacted him years later, and he's like, I remember you. You were that screamer in the back. So it wasn't really an opera debut. It was a screaming debut, Parpignol. My professional operatic debut was Turiddu in Cavalleria Rusticana with Minnesota Concert Opera. So it was in concert with some fantastic colleagues. And we had a recording of that. I still listen to it to this day because I'm just like, wow, it was my first thing, and it was really special to me. But talk about doing hard things.
Oh man, that was your first. Wow.
But I love it. I mean, I won't give details, but before my career really started, and I was trying to get it off the ground, I was given this offer to do an Andrea Chenier, and I hadn't done any full professional roles, and I was like, okay. So I was like, yeah, I accept. They wanted me to do the title character. It was in concert, but still. So I got the score, and I worked on it forever before the thing. I ended up backing out of it. I had some mentors say, it had to do with pay scale and time commitment and all that kind of. There's a lot of factors. So I ended up pulling out of the production because it really would have hurt my personal life, the stability in my life to do that. But the point of me bringing that up is that I discovered that it fit, even as a super young singer. It just felt good to do. It felt right, because I had always been put into this side of like, oh, you're young, so you have to sing these certain things because you're a young tenor. It doesn't matter what your color is. It doesn't matter what feels good to your instrument. You have to sing these sort of light, things like Barber and Mozart, and Traviata and Mozart and all these things. And I just thought I was so bad because I couldn't do them, because none of them ever fit. And then I get the score of Chenier and I start singing through it. And of course it's hard, but it just felt right. It felt good.
Yeah, the rep. I guess the fuck is like a glove. Like the rep is like a glove. When it, same with sopranos, boy. So some of those, like the big dramatics, it just works for their voice.
Absolutely,
born that way.
And you try to push those people out of their lane and into another lane, and it's not going to feel good, and it's not going to sound good either. That's the thing. Like I not only did it not feel good for me to be doing this other rep, I can't imagine it sounded good. So, and that's the other thing. Like, how did I get into these? How did I get into school at all? I mean, if I was sounding that way back then, because I had no knowledge, I had no exposure to opera back then, and
It
so
takes time for bigger voices to lock in, of course, and so I think it's in. Did you do a lot of young artist programs on the way up?
I didn't. I did not, and I didn't do them for a number of reasons. I didn't do them because not that I was taking a stance, but I'm a contrarian, sort of. I've always
I would
sort of
never have guessed
rebelled.
that.
Yeah, right. I've always sort of pushed against the thing that everybody says you have to do, and so the consensus is that right after school you go and you do a young artist program. I was like, nah, not gonna do it, not for me. And I had done the Ames program. Incidentally, I'm going back there next week. They've hired some alumni to perform. It's their 50th.
That's exciting.
It's actually their 50th was 2 years ago, but it was postponed 2 years because of COVID.
Of course.
And so they're celebrating their 50th year anniversary this summer, which happens to be my 10-year anniversary when I did the Ames program. So it's all great. So they've hired some alumni to come back and do some work with them. So I'm going to Austria next week to do some Neapolitan songs with orchestra, and I'm so excited to go back there.
That sounds like a lovely experience.
It's going to be
short,
amazing.
Sweet, great music, great atmosphere.
Great orchestra, great. One of my favorite cities on the planet. Amazing friends and teachers who are still there. We're going to be there. I haven't seen.
Are you performing at the Mozart Saal?
No, we're performing at the Kazamatten. I don't know if you've been there. That's the.
I'm making my debut in March. I'm doing a Beethoven 5 out there with a Hungarian orchestra.
In Graz?
It's going to be in Salzburg.
Oh, in Salzburg.
I've never been to Graz.
So this is in Graz. The Ames program's in Graz. We're going to be visiting Salzburg when we're over there, but I'm super excited. Get your
Mozart tour on.
Yeah, I mean we're going there primarily because my wife is a huge Sound of Music fan.
Oh yeah.
There we go. We've already booked the original Sound of Music tour, so we're super excited about that. And then I said, you know what? We can't go to Salzburg and not see the Mozart museums. I mean, we'd be pretty bad musicians.
I find it so ironic that Mozart only wanted to get out of there. That's all he wanted to do was get out and go to Vienna. He's like,
I know.
But they like that. He's like, he couldn't wait. He had to get fired by the Archbishop Colorado. He was the assistant director at the cathedral. He had to get fired by him in order to leave.
Yeah, what a position to be in. I mean, man, he just had such a crummy life. I mean, to just be begging somebody to fire you. So
he was so uniquely positioned because his dad hooked him up. I know. His dad was a good composer. He was a really. I've done so much research into Mozart, and I just love thinking about him as a human. What a wild ride.
It is really fascinating. That's you didn't ask, but I'm tying this into this sort of, I'm going to call it a movement for lack of a better term, but this movement in my life to really discover and educate myself on the human side of these monoliths. I mean, even so far as it down to the characters. I just premiered a Adriana Lecouvreur, which is another one of those shows that isn't done enough, and people say it's because either the cast is so huge because it's an enormous cast, or the plot's too confusing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, excuse me, I was hooked on Downton Abbey. Lecouvreur is not more complicated than Downton Abbey. I mean, it's like if people are watching Bridgerton and that sort of level of thing, this is not more complicated. And so I was playing Maurizio, and there's a biography. There's a definitive. There might be more than one, but there's like a definitive biography written about the historical Maurice de Saxe, who is Maurizio. And it is one of the most fascinating books I had ever read, and it is out of this world. So, I was telling some of my cast, because I'm such a nerd when it comes to some of this stuff.
You have to be.
This is not complicated. The opera of Lecouvreur is the boiled down.
Has to be by the nature of singing and just musical structure. You can't get all the words in. You have to simplify the storytelling to.
You can't fit all the characters. into that, and all the countries and all of I mean, it was extraordinary. But to find that humanity, to find that actual character, actual not a character, the actual person, Maurice de Saxe, and to just know how he lived and the trouble he got in, and but the things that were important to him, because it's easy, and I'll use this sort of as a metaphor, but it's easy to look at a character within a context of an opera and be like, oh, he's a pig. Especially from the modern day lens, especially, we look at
very difficult with the modern day. When we're looking at people like, we're looking at Butterfly and Pinkerton, like, oh my God, he's a child rapist, like just the worst.
Yeah, it's really, exactly. That's another one of those extreme things of the disparity between the modern lens of looking at things and when things were written. And, but it's important, I think, for me anyway, to understand, if you can, who that character is, so that you can get up there and not just be like, oh, I'm just a dishonorable pig. Like, because for Maurizio, honor is a huge part of who he is. I mean, he was a philanderer. He bankrupted a few wealthy women who he'd just move on to the next. He'd spend all their money, move on to the next one, and that was just what he did.
That sounds an awful lot like Wagner was as a person. He would bankrupt owners, and think about Bayreuth. He built a temple to himself that only performs his music to this day. That's unique in the history of Western culture, right? I mean, that cult of personality,
special sort of ego.
Yeah,
that's. I mean, in a way, I'd never want to go to those extremes, but in a way, I'm envious of that confidence.
I mean, can you imagine? It's like, this is only going to perform my music. I mean, like, what? Like that to build an opera house that only plays one composer's art. What?
I mean, to be so sure that
Verdi wouldn't have done that. Puccini wouldn't have done that.
No.
Amazing.
No, I don't think they would have. No, I mean, they're so critical. I mean, they were confident in their own right, but still pretty critical. I mean, which I think is an important aspect.
Have to be. They were masters of human drama, masters of the vocal instruments. I mean, they had that perfect combination of musical storytelling and dramatic impulse. And the challenge I always find with making an opera great is they have to have the right librettist.
Yep. And Verdi knew that struggle well.
He failed a few times, and some of the great music doesn't hold up as an opera. It's good, but it's just not great because the librettist, there was problems with the libretto.
Yeah.
And they never liked the librettists. They were always struggling. Yeah. It's a thankless job being a librettist.
Those relationships are really fascinating, sometimes hilarious to read about. I mean, pitching an opera idea to a librettist and then one signing on, but then wanting to go with another one, but the publisher said you had to use this guy, so you use him for 2 weeks, and then you cause some fight so that you can drop him, pay his contract out, go with the original guy, but then maybe he gets sick, you got to bring in a third guy. I mean, it's just, I can't imagine. And that's why I think people like Boito were like, just gonna do it myself. Mascagni did that too, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
For Fritz, he wrote his own libretto.
And you know who was another librettist? This is interesting. Wagner wrote all his own librettists. After he finished The Ring, he wrote, and he said, I forget who he wrote it to, but he wrote a letter to one of his donors, and he said, I've done it. I've written the greatest piece of literature ever written. Not the greatest piece of music, the greatest piece of literature ever written.
Wow. I mean, that falls in line with what, building a shrine, musical shrine to yourself. And that's unique. That confidence, I'll never come anywhere near that.
A lot of what we've talked about before the show was about pop culture references, and I find so much value in pop culture. Like, I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan, or I was until they ruined season 8. I'm waiting for the book to come out to actually correct what they messed up or screwed up in that one. Or I'm certainly a huge Lord of the Rings fan. What do you think about modern storytelling?
That's an interesting question. I have a lot of feelings on it. I feel like it's. I want to answer that without putting my foot in my mouth. So, as we were talking about before the podcast, I'm a rambler. I love sometime in the right setting.
You are a natural podcaster, my friend. This is like so easy for you.
I'm just imagining that I'm just talking to a friend, and that's
you are.
I don't have to imagine that you're a friend. I have to imagine that no one else is listening. That's what I meant. So by no means is my finger on the pulse of modern storytelling, but from my purview, very limited things that I allow in, I feel like it's kind of all over the place. There are some things that we find. I mean, if we're going to talk modern, we're talking the last 100 years, I guess, if we're going to include like Tolkien in the modern or contemporary. I love Tolkien. The Lord of the Rings, one of my favorite things I've ever read. I'm not one of those people who like rereads it every year. I'm envious of those people. I love to read, but I also I loathe it at the same time. I have ADHD, and it's not
a
one
commitment.
Of those things
it is certainly a commitment.
It's not one of those things that's easy for me to concentrate on. So I really have to like have the bug to read, to actually commit to it. I also, because a lot of friends of mine who hear me say that, like, oh, well, then you do audiobooks. I don't like audiobooks. I was never into audiobooks. So I'm in this weird thing. Again, the contrarian in me who like can, you can hand me the food, but I don't like it. I'm really hungry, but I don't want to eat that. It's sort of petulant in a way, but that's just sort of the way it is. And so I love Lord of the Rings. Stephen King, I'm a big fan of Stephen King. The Dark Tower series is one of my favorite.
Boy, they messed up those movies. God, they wasted some great actors to McConaughey and Idris Elba.
That movie was
like, how the hell could they screw that up with those guys?
I really disliked. I mean, it's really good casting.
Oh, agreed.
Amazing casting. It's the idea that this absurd idea that they can't get the funding. I mean, you don't need to. It doesn't need to be. Lord of the Rings was a C budget, lower than C budget, movie. There were a few production companies that didn't want to pick it up. I mean, it changed hands, I think, before it fell to New Line. So it's like it doesn't need to be this AAA sort of blockbuster series. Make it this sort of. I mean, I think Peter Jackson should take it to put it in his hands, but I mean, it's a huge undertaking. Being a pretty big fan of the series, I think
didn't Peter Jackson put 7 years into Lord of the Rings trilogy?
I'm sure he did, because
can you imagine that's most of what he did for 7 years. That's it.
Yeah.
And you can tell his dedication to every shot, and to like, I mean, it really is admirable. I've watched the behind the scenes many times. I'm always fascinated. Yeah. Those movies still hold up.
Oh, absolutely, they do. I mean, in my opinion. I mean, the last time I watched it, and this was a mistake, my wife and I watched the whole trilogy straight through, right as the lockdowns were happening. So right as we had, because it was a whirlwind for us, not just losing work, but I was working nonstop. My wife and I weren't married at the time. We had just gotten a place that she was living in, but I wasn't living there. And so I left. I was sent home from a job, and I didn't have a home, essentially, because I was going to move in after we were married. Suddenly I was here, and our life was a total whirlwind of getting to know each other in the same house and not having any work and all those things. And so then we also decided to watch one of our cinematic, our year-long or more cinematic journey of watching all of these things. We were like, we're going to watch the trilogy. We haven't watched it together in a long time.
Here's the question: was it the extended version or the standard version?
Of course,
has to be extended version.
And if I didn't immediately fall into a giant pit of despair, and I mean immediately, as soon as Annie Lennox's voice started coming across those speakers, I couldn't get off the couch for a week. I mean, I was inconsolable.
Yeah, it's great music.
If I hadn't felt that, we probably would have gone back and watched with commentary immediately after, because I love the commentary as well. But yeah, that sent me into a spiral at the end of that movie, man. That still just hits home. Now I don't delve into the Hobbit. We don't include the Hobbit.
The Hobbit, you can't. That was like a shameless cash grab. They tried to turn a children's book into 3 movies. Yeah, ridiculous.
The other thing I feel, there were a couple sort of big mistakes I felt like they made. And again, who am I to judge them? They made tons and tons of money. I mean, it's whatever. I'm doing this for myself. Like, oh, I think they made a mistake. Oh.
It's your podcast. You can judge
I wouldn't have done it that way. But there's in my mind there were two big mistakes. Obviously, I do feel like they pandered a little bit. I don't know if that was a decision they made, or maybe they were trying to make it more grand, or they were trying to explore some of the corners of that world.
They were trying to do like too much. They were trying to make it a goofy comedy so they can get the kids to come, and they were trying to mix in the seriousness of Lord of the Rings. But the tone of the book is a very lighthearted story compared to Lord of the Rings.
Exactly, and I think some of the corners that they went into, they were including some of the stories of Middle Earth, and some of on blanking on what's the book about the rings?
Silmarillion.
So, thank you.
Silmarillion.
Totally blanked on that name. I think they were using sort of a comprehensive understanding of Middle Earth to tell the story of the Hobbit, which you might think would be a good thing, but I don't think he hadn't written all of it.
No, it wasn't even close. That was way early, and the Hobbit was his escape from the war.
Exactly, and it was meant to be a story to kids. It was meant to be sort of like a bedtime story. It has that tone. It has the tone of like your grandfather sitting you down and being like, "Oh, and the trolls, they came out, Billy and Bobby," and I don't remember the names. I'm embarrassing myself. But yeah, they tried to like make it all of these things. The first thing, and it's a really tiny mistake, but to me, it took me out of the immersion completely. The dwarves had necks. I haven't heard anybody else talk about this. But the reason Gimli and a couple of the other dwarves in the Lord of the Rings, there's only like 3, are so believable is because that beard goes straight to shoulder. It's like the helmet comes right to his shoulders. He looks like a dwarf now. But now when you have these like attractive Hollywood actors and they're like, I'm just short. Like, you don't look like a dwarf. It's not just that you're short. Dwarf is this other race. Like, they have to look, in my mind, they look like Gimli, and none of them looked like Gimli. And that was, to me, it took me out of the immersion of it immediately, because it just looked like a bunch of Hollywood actors, with a prosthetic or with a bald head or whatever it was.
There's a YouTube I love. You should. I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a he criticizes movies. It's called The Critical Drinker, and his takedown of he goes through famous movies. He crushes the Hobbit. It's hysterically funny. He just does this in this style. It's very. You should check it out. Anyway, so
I definitely have to check that out.
You like to laugh at funny bad movies? It's like, he's the guy.
I'm envious of these people who are so self-assured in their opinions. I'm always preambling myself to just me. It's just I'm the only one who thinks this, and I'm totally open to being educated to another direction.
But you're a storyteller, and that's the one thing. Watching the commitment to your storytelling, it's the commitment you bring to telling a story that makes it powerful or not. And that's something. The first thing I noticed about your singing was you were 100% committed to that role. And
thank you. That's I really appreciate that. I mean, that's not something. I was in Italy a couple years ago doing a Carmen, and became really good friends with the director. And the director, he paid me this compliment, and I said, "Yeah, thank you for saying that." And he kind of sensed my shock that he would not only that he would say it, but the shock that it might be true. And he was like, "Doesn't everybody tell you that?" I'm like, "No." I don't know if it's something about our culture or our culture times the opera community, or maybe it's just my experience and how I come across. It could be any of these things. But I find that compliments aren't freely given, especially not within the compound or confines of that working term. There are productions I've worked where people are, a little more free with, complimenting, supporting each other, but especially coming from like directors and such, it's very rare that they'll just come up to you and say, "Oh, you're really good," or something. Maybe they think you already know it or whatever it is. It's just this thing I found. And so it's nice. It's nice to hear it. I mean, I think for anybody,
I think I'm a very tough critic of myself. I watch my videos. I hate I handled that phrase. I should have done it this way. I should have connected the fermata this way. Yeah, that's all we do is think about ourselves, because we're always wanting to be our best. And I think that's it's always surprising. Oh, someone actually enjoyed that a lot. Okay, that's it always makes me think.
I 100% agree. I got sent a video. I got sent a link today to a video of something I'd done in February or March, and immediately my heart sank. I was like, "Oh, great! I gotta watch this garbage that I did." Like, I gotta, because we're so critical of ourselves, and it's definitely something that I'm working on. And one of the things that I've been doing, I've been watching a lot of interviews with Hollywood actors. Some of my favorite Hollywood actors, SNL comedians who turned actors, stuff like that. Watching a lot of these people who have way more fame than I'll ever even want to come close to, and success and all of these things in sort of the mainstream. And a lot of them talking about contentment and what their path was, and how we look at some people and we think, oh, they're so successful, they've gotten everything, and talk about 20 movies they didn't get, they got passed over for, or something like that. And that's been a big lesson. I mean, it's definitely something I'm trying to cultivate in this new phase in my life. Is just like, be where you are. And I have a really to me, it's an important quote from Goethe. It says, "It's not about the destination; it's the direction."
The process is
It's
everything, right? It's the process.
journey, yeah. I mean, we're living in every second, so it's like, to be caught up in, oh, this gig isn't good enough or whatever. All these things that we tell ourselves, and just to be content, like on that about, I'm not at whatever, and I didn't go to these places and whatever. And tying it back into an earlier question, like, did I do a lot of young artist programs? No. And my initial sort of sense was that I felt much more impassioned back then than I do now about it. But of course, I was in my early 20s. I was like, I'm going to forge my own career. I'm going to make it I'm going to grab it by the horns, and I'm going to take it. Unfortunately, the opera industry doesn't work so well with that, because there are some doors that you do have to go through. And so I tried at a couple places, and I got mixed sort of feedback. And I did do a couple of I was an emerging artist with Virginia Opera, and Sarasota Opera is really where I got my career turned over, into being full time. That's where sort of the door unlocked. But yeah, I'd always had this idea that I was gonna forge my own way. And the other side of that coin is that, we hear so many people say, oh yeah, there's no one path to get there. But we're always talking about the getting there. Well, you know what? There's no one getting there. The getting there is different for everybody. If you're somebody, if fame, Ewan McGregor, who's one of my favorite people, if Ewan is listening to this, I'm a huge fan. Long Way Round, one of my favorite movies. I've watched it about 1,000 times. I don't know if you know that movie, but
I don't. But I love the actor, certainly.
Ewan McGregor rides motorcycles, and so do I. This is a drawing my wife had commissioned of her and I on my motorcycle.
Fantastic.
And him and his friend Charlie Borman ride around the world. And since that movie, they've done it 3 times in 3 directions on motorcycles. And it's
what a commitment! Wow.
I mean, months long. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. But he has a quote in this movie. Talks about fame and how if your goal is fame, you'll never be satisfied, because fame is not achievable. Because you think, like, you get to a level of fame and then, oh, I'm famous, now I can relax. No, fame is the thing that you always want to keep going. There's no ceiling to it. And so that was, I heard that when I was really young, and that was always kind of important to me, to know that fame is not the thing you're chasing. And even success is this word that's thrown out, and that's sort of an elusive thing, because that means different things to different people. And so to me, it's always been about contentment, being content with where you are in life and how you're getting to where you want to be next, and just being there the whole time, and being nice to people and making friends. And I mean,
I find that super important. I mean, most of, I do gigs that pay a lot. I do gigs that pay a little, and I work with a lot of different artists, and that's a blessing. I get to meet such cool people, and that's why I do a lot of the projects. It has nothing to do with the money on some of them,
Absolutely.
But it really is special to meet people on the way, and it enriches your life, and it makes me think in ways I never would have otherwise.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And that's the really cool thing about this podcast. Not only just having the opportunity to talk to people and just kind of get to hang out. I mean,
You know, we
That's
came up with the idea.
fascinating.
My son Quentin and I, we were, all my guest collecting was canceled. Everything wiped out. All my turned virtual and Zoom calls all day and night. I'm a teacher at the university level, and it just got to be so depressing. I'm like, man, I miss my colleagues. I was supposed to be in Europe. I was going to have like a beer with the concert master and meet the tenor soloist for a drink, or like go for a walk with friends, and all that got scrubbed.
Yeah.
So this is my way to get back and start, to listen, let the musicians talk about life, and to just get, because I think it was so brutal for us during COVID.
Yeah.
How did you handle COVID? I mean, you obviously you had lots of great performances canceled, and you had a very busy schedule wiped. What was it like?
Yeah. No, that's even now. It still stings to sort of think about it and talk about it. I mean, I had a really big year going into COVID, and I had a lot of big things in the works for the next year that just the bottom just dropped out. But I was also lucky at the same time. I mean, it's what's that that term Brene Brown talks about? Oh shoot, it's the idea that your feelings about something aren't legitimate because other people have it worse, and there's a term for that, and Brene Brown talks about that. I love Brene Brown.
That is a good point. I mean, we talked to so many different people about this, about 300 almost, and it's amazing. For example, Brian, Jade, and I went to church together growing up. So Brian, he's like, I don't think I can wait tables anymore, but maybe I'll have. It was just this kind of like, thought that, we were all, he had to take 3-4 lessons a week just to keep his skills sharp, even though there was no work on the horizon.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone's got to. We had to find ways to keep ourselves going and to be positive and.
Yeah, I didn't always succeed in that area.
None of us. I don't think anybody did, honestly.
Yeah, no, and that's one of the areas where social media was harmful for me, because I did see a lot of people, doing projects and things like that, and that was, I didn't receive that well. And that was just through my own lens of perceiving, what should have been, a joyful thing, that some people got to do work. And then when I was able to do work, I was very grateful about that. But yeah, we bounced back and forth. I mean, initially, and my wife were talking about this the other day, like when the lockdowns first started rolling in, I mean, I remember we went to the grocery store right after I got sent home and the lockdown hadn't come into effect. We went to a grocery store, went to a Wegmans. And I remember there being a line because they were only letting in so many people, but no one was wearing masks because the masks weren't a thing yet. That hadn't come out. And so we're standing in these lines and waiting to go into a grocery store. And, we go in there and my wife's going, oh, well, we got to get all this toilet paper. And I'm like, nah, this is all going to blow over and this isn't going to be a thing. It's still, supply chains are still a thing now.
Sure.
And so like we went through a phase where, we were just doing takeout and drinking a lot, making cocktails. And then that got out of hand. And then we did Whole30 for, 2 or 3 months. And, so things like that. We were slated to get married May 1st of 2020. We postponed that twice. We just did our formal celebration this year back in May 2022.
Congratulations.
But we got married back in 2020. We did. Thank you. We did a backyard thing, 10 people. We Zoomed it to other people. Her grandma was on the Zoom, like talking while the pastor was doing his sermon, and it was hilarious. And so we these things that you look at the time and you're like, oh my God, this is awful. We had to postpone our wedding. And now we look back and we're like, hey, we had 3 dates that we celebrate now. We're like, hey, here's this totally screwed up one that came and went. And we're like, bye. And then we have, so I tell people, like, you only get married once, and we have these unique experiences from it. And, I was lucky enough, both my wife and I were lucky enough to get some performance opportunities during COVID. Shout out to, Opera Delaware and Maryland Opera, who were doing some unique things, as a lot of companies were trying to find a way to do.
Make it work, right?
She was involved with the slated to do something with the Princeton Festival, and they got totally wiped out, but they still did some sort of like artist performance thing on Zoom. So she got to do that early on in the lockdowns. so we were all over the place, and it was really, really hard for me to practice it. Every time I mean, it would take me 2 weeks of sitting there being like, I can't practice. I don't want to practice. Why would I practice? 2 weeks to go by, and I get myself into the practice room, and sorry, there's some construction next door. Of course, they're doing it now.
All right.
I drag myself into the practice room, and it would like physically hurt, like a heartache to be practicing something, and then I'd put it away. And I was talking to my therapist about all of these things, and of course he was booked. Everybody's
everyone's trying to process this,
and he reminded me of this thing. And I have ADHD, and I'm sure you can't tell with the way I'm looking around. He reminded me that as a highly sort of specialized performer, and as somebody with ADHD, we have this ability to really focus our mind, and kind of like a laser. And he reminded me that you're able to pull back. If the thing you're focused on is suddenly not there, you have this option to pull back and to focus on other things. And so that just totally, took the shades off my eyes. And one of the things that really got me into doing was songwriting again. I mean, I've been writing music since I was a kid, never doing anything with it. And unfortunately, a lot of those songs that I wrote since I was a teenager are just gone because, I didn't record them or anything like that. So
I play guitar or piano?
I played both.
Nice.
We don't own a piano in our apartment. We have like a little crappy keyboard that I can pluck notes out on to learn music. But like I said, growing up, my mom played piano. She had a piano. I wrote a lot of piano music, when I was growing up. And so, yeah, I play guitar as well. And I've been very slowly, lazily, and self-consciously writing music. And but I actually have a goal, is I actually want to put out an album as my end goal. And that was a product of COVID.
That'll be a great project. I mean, I know several of my colleagues, our colleagues who've been putting out albums, who have from Mark Delavant to Valerian Ravinsky. Everyone's, I think it's so important that we kind of put ourselves out there in that way. I think it's a really healthy thing to do, is to put down your thoughts. Who are some of the singer-songwriters that you like?
That's an interesting question. So I have sort of these two sort of phases of my life, and for a long time they were divided very, very, very decisively. Like this early period of my life, and then after that. And the early period was like Christian metalcore, because I went to a private Christian school, and grew up going to church and all these things, and was really into this metalcore scene that sort of originated out of Pennsylvania. I grew up in Pennsylvania. This metalcore movement that originated in Pennsylvania and West Virginia. And
who were some of the big bands to come out of that?
The two, I mean, there was a ton. I'll name Zayo, which is my favorite band of all time. Still listen to them today. And they're still performing. They're actually doing some tours right now, and they're going to be in near Philadelphia when I'm away, when I'm in Chicago. So I'm really bummed about that. And then Living Sacrifice is another huge band.
Okay, I've heard of them.
Yeah.
I'm actually my son's a drummer. He's a rock drummer. He's on tour right now with the founder of the Butthole Surfers. They're touring all over the place. And
that's an awesome name.
Last summer he was on tour with the lead singer of Yes. He went on tour.
Oh my God, my wife and I love Yes. We played
John Anderson.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes was the song we played. I Would Have Waited Forever by Yes was the intro that we walked into at our wedding.
That's a great tune, man. I think that's severely underrated.
Absolutely, that whole album is
his
gold.
Overdubbing and the vocals, unbelievable on that album.
I absolutely love Yes, and that album is incredible. And some of the guitar riffs in that are just absolutely amazing.
To watch my 17-year-old, he was 16 at the time, on tour in Chicago. I had to fly and see him to perform, and he did all these Yes charts. It was unbelievable.
That's cool. Incredible. Man, I love to see that resurgence of these.
I'm not going to feel that way about the Butthole Surfers. I'm going to go, but it's going to be like, ugh.
What type of music are they?
It's like hard punk. They had a huge hit in the 90s, Pepper, that has 64 million listens.
I'm gonna look that up. I have not heard of them.
They're very influential punk band. Like they tried to be as anti-establishment as possible, but they made it huge.
Yeah, that unfortunately is the downfall to a lot of punk bands, because that's sort of like the tenet, is that like you can't be popular. You
I heard
can't
they
be
try to
this
do.
thing.
I was reading this thing. I guess I don't know much about it. I know a couple of their songs, and I know I don't like them very much, but I know that it's like the music's very. But my son's like, Dad, there's some type of music that like you're not gonna like, but you have to see live. And he's right. I'm like, so okay, there's
Yeah.
tons of percussion. There's two drummers on the stage at once, and they're just nailing it. It's very hard to play. So I'm like, okay, you're a musician. I'll listen. I'll come in with an open mind. We'll see.
I mean,
They're all dressed
it'll
as
be
a
an experience.
the costume is he's dressed as outrageous as you possibly can. That was so you have to be very outrageous on this tour. Okay.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, that's something else.
I'm gonna go see him in Philly at the Fringe Festival. I'll see him in a couple weeks.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's so cool. He's playing in the Fringe Festival.
Yeah, it's gonna be wild. I'm like, I hope I like the music and maybe I'll stay.
Yeah. No, that's so cool. Just FYI, I lost your video. That doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's come back.
Know.
Yeah,
Okay.
my son's toggling back and forth between your
gotcha.
screen. Whenever you talk for a while, you're alone on the screen, and then it goes back and forth. And
Oh, gotcha. So now people have this lovely view of the both of us at the same time. What we do is singer-songwriters, and then sort of my next phase that I went into, Weezer. Weezer's my number one favorite band, and ironically, it's funny that you bring up punk, because they sort of came out. They weren't exactly punk.
Influence, though, definitely an influence.
Definitely influence. I mean, definitely sort of their first album, being released very garage band-esque, and they have such an interesting career because they're still writing, they're still putting out albums, they're still touring to this day. It's been 30 years. Yeah, 30 years.
I'm getting
I
old.
think Pinkerton came out in 92, maybe later than that. So almost 30 years, 25 years or so. And so they have this, they're such an interesting career that SNL even did a sketch about it, and I'm one of the people who love them, who love everything they've done, because I respect them as being not just one thing. And I think that's important, because you can't just be the one thing that people want you. They can't just be the band that wrote Pinkerton for forever, for 25 years. I mean, the front man, Rivers Cuomo, who's like a mild personal idol of mine, is such an intelligent guy and a great songwriter, and a lot of the time I can see what he's trying to do in an album, and it's I don't know if I have the gift to just understand him. It's weird. I mean, he's a quirky dude, and but I've always sort of felt like I've been able to understand what he's trying to do with an album, even an album that might flop or not be what people consider to be their great albums. And I like every one of their albums. I mean, they have like,
that's when you know you like a band, when you dig into the deep tracks and you're digging deep. And sometimes I discover more about, when I find a band I like on the show, I love to scout the bands, because I'm looking for ones that really have something to say. And it's a lot of fun for me. Me and the boys both, my old Quentin was a jazz guitar player and Mason being a drummer. So I love contemporary rock music. So it's like I play the drums as a hobby. So for me, it's like this is like my alter ego. I get to talk to people who are like rock stars and like people who tour around, and it's a blast. But it's amazing like how creative the rock people are.
Absolutely, and it's sort of always been. I'm sorry, I'm buzzing. I've always been picky, but weirdly picky, because people might hear that and be like, "You're picky, but you listen to Weezer." Yeah, there's certain sensibilities that we all have.
What speaks to you about that band? What speaks to you about Weezer in particular?
Oh man, I've been following them since the beginning. So Pinkerton and Blue, the Blue record. I listened to Blue on the bus. I mean, and when I was in high school riding the bus, I had to take 2 buses each way, because I went to a private school, but I was in a bigger district. I was in the wrong district, so I had to get up at like 5:45, take the bus at 6 a.m., take an hour or more bus ride out to the public school, wait there for 45 minutes to get picked up by another bus, and ride that an hour to my school. And then I do that kind of in reverse, but with a different school as the waypoint. So I would ride the bus for 4 hours a day or more. And so that was the day of the Discman. The Discman came out. And so I, put the Discman, and anybody who had a Discman, I mean, knew that once that was in your backpack, you were going to leave it in there for a while. It wasn't like, oh, new shuffle or, put in a different. I didn't have a 6 CD Discman in my backpack. Oh, that would have been cool. And so it's like you picked that disc you could listen to for 4 hours, and that sat in there. So the blue album was there, and so I loved the distortions that they chose in the early years. I loved the guitar distortions. I loved the chord progressions, the sort of just their general style and storytelling. And they were sort of irreverent back then with their lyrics and stuff like that. And I was rebellious, and, I sort of liked that. So it wasn't like over the top. So, you could be sort of low key about it. And I just loved that. But as I got older, I expanded into, I really liked Coldplay for a number of years. I really liked Radiohead for a number of years. And so it's ironic because as I write my own music, I hear those 3 bands sort of competing for, a section of my style or whatever. It's like I'll write a thing, I'm like, wow, that really is kind of Radiohead-esque. I'm like, that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing Tom York in my head right now. And I'm like, to me, that's when I think I'm onto something. I think I'm onto something that could be relatively good or whatever. If I'm playing something and I feel like, oh, that sounds like Tom York or Chris Martin, I'm probably onto something.
That's great. Have you ever released on your YouTube channel or on any of your social media platforms?
I haven't, because I have found that I am uniquely and strangely exceedingly high insecure with my songwriting. It's really, I played a song for like my in-laws were up for New Year's this year, and I played them a song, and that was really hard for me. So for some reason, like as a performer, people think, oh, you perform in front of hundreds and thousands of people all the time, and like, yeah, that's totally different because
it really is. You're in character.
Rarely not
right?
Me.
You're in character. You're in makeup. You're the stage.
Yeah.
Distance.
Even please, they're hammering on the wall. Even when it's just me, like in a concert setting, you're doing some songs or an aria concerts or whatever, there's still sort of a performer persona that you inhabit. It's armor. You kind of arm yourself. Even if you're gonna be vulnerable in how you perform. I think. Maybe other people are better at this than I am, but I feel like I have to have that armor up there, and to do my songs, to share my songwriting, that's like completely exposed. And
we have a lot of singer-songwriters in the show, and like just a lot of the females that they get their one voice and a guitar, and like they got to get in front of a Nashville audience, and I'm like, that's very intimidating. I find that to be intimidating too.
Oh, I can't. I have no desire. There's no ounce of desire in my body to take that aspect of what I do and take it somewhere big. It's mostly for me. I do have that sort of, I'll admit, I have that sort of like back of my head thing that's like, well, maybe I could take it to a studio and just see if I could put it and mix it a little better, because I'm mixing it myself. I don't have any good. Actually, I should talk to you. I should talk to your son after this. So
he's pretty good at that. We have some knowledge there. We can certainly give some ideas.
Because I don't have any equipment because I'm just petrified of putting money into something that I'm not going to have any idea how to use.
There are some incredible units that do incredibly high level stuff that are not terribly expensive.
So yeah, we need to have a conversation about that, because I'm mixing all my stuff now off of an online platform, and it's decent. It's not great. It's decent.
Most professional singer-songwriters they use scratch. They'll do a scratch recording at home and bring it to their producer. That's kind of that's a great way to do it. You should always be voice memoing your ideas down, because you never know when that'll turn into a song.
Absolutely. Oh, my voice memo is like, my phone is constantly shouting at me, like, you have no more storage. And I'm like, I know. I'll delete these pictures so I can put more songs on there.
Maybe get a new iPhone. Get the million, the gold storage plan.
Yeah, pretty soon we're probably going to have battery packs attached to our person.
It's going to be our thoughts go in the cloud.
Yeah, I got you just plug into my external hard drive here in my back. I got 4 terabytes back here.
Backpack.
My terabytes are acting up.
Well, we got to have you back on the show again. This is a lot of fun. We can do this for 6 hours.
I've definitely enjoyed this. As you can tell, in the right circumstances, I love to talk.
Wow, man, this has been a blast. So now you've got some huge concerts coming up. You're going to Vienna for the first time out of the country in a bit. Now, tell us about your, I know you're working in the Lyric Opera of Chicago, one of the greatest houses in the world. So tell us about that one.
Yeah, I'm going back to the Lyric. I was there last season. I debuted at the Lyric as Malcolm in the amazing production of Macbeth. It was such a blast getting to be a part of that cast and that experience. I mean, I met just some world-class people and to perform in that hall. I mean, it's a beautiful hall. And so, I'm going back to cover the title role in Erdani, and I'm super excited about that. Mr. Russell Thomas is performing that, so I'm thrilled to get to meet him. Been wanting to hear him live for a long time, and so I'm super excited about that. That's coming up soon. I'll actually be in Graz, Austria, not Vienna, but returning with the Ames Festival, doing some Neapolitan. That's next week that I'm heading over there. So be able to get out of the country for the first time, and which is good because every time I've been out of the country in the last 5 years, always been for work. Really, I've had very little. We did do a week in York to do some engagement photos and stuff, and we loved York, England. It was amazing. So this is nice because this is kind of our placeholder honeymoon. We haven't really done a honeymoon, my wife and I. So this is our
sing some Neapolitan songs, enjoy some time. That's gonna be a beautiful time.
I mean, it's one of my favorite cities in Europe, and so there's not. I mean, I'm doing these concerts, but they're kind of low key. You know, it's not a ton of effort. It's not a ton of preparation. I mean, Ernani is massive prepreparation, and
I can imagine.
Yeah,
at that level, and you get that call. We've had some of the artists who go on at the Met and there's covers, and they have like who was it? I just had Riccardo Tamuno on. He said he just did Don Carlo, and he was just covering, and he goes, they told him he's fine. 10 o'clock next morning, he's like, you need to be here in half an hour.
Yep. No, it's
matinee, broadcast. Go.
I've always despised covering because in the past. I mean, and I've actually had my career started at Sarasota because I was a cover and took over a production. And that's not, it's not rare. It's not unheard of, but I mean, it was not nearly as frequent as is happening now. And a good friend of mine, shout out to Leah Hawkins. She posted on Facebook yesterday about this idea of preparing covers and just going into it with the attitude because things have changed, since COVID. And they were like,
oh my God, everyone's got viable covers, and not just covers, but covers that could literally go on.
And that really, I've been preparing this cover since I got the contract. I mean, it's just a dream to have this, but at the same time, there's this weight of feeling like I don't like covering. I mean, nobody likes covering. I mean, I know some phenomenal world-class people who still cover, and of course we all do it. Everybody does it. And it's that, the idea that there's an opportunity under that's kind of the reason we do it. But at the same time, it's difficult to prep for something that you're like, well, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to, but there's that real chance nowadays.
It's a real chance.
Will you go on, or maybe you'll do a couple of weeks of rehearsal or something like that. I mean, it's really like you're a second cast sort of thing. And that really reignited that spark for me. Saying that last night, I was like, yeah, I really got to, get the cobwebs out of my thinking and be like, no, slap out of it, you idiot, and do the work, do better, be better, get good. As the gaming
we say
says.
That all the time. My boys are always like, whenever my son will complain about a drum bass, well, get good, practice, or they'll say, I'll be bitching about something. My son's like, get good, Dad. I'm like, we've said it all the time in our family. They're all gamers, that's why.
Oh yeah, me too. Yeah, we have so many more things to cover. I mean,
one of these days you'll come down. We'll get you and your wife down to the shore, and we'll do a live podcast. They're a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Too. It's a lot of fun.
Right now we're drifters, as we don't have a car right now. Stinking deer.
Next time, avoid the deer. They're never a good idea. And they're everywhere.
He looked friendly. He was at bait and switch. He was like, we can hang out.
Do I come? Do I go? Do I come?
In my car.
Well, Matthew, where can people go to find out more about you and your career and your various concerts and performances?
Absolutely. They can go to my my agent's webpage, adaartists.com, or my own personal page at matthewvickerstenor.com. And hopefully I'll have it updated. I think it's updated right now. So
mine is pathetically out of date. That's something I got to do too.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do? Can only
my agent's page is a lot nicer.
That's
good.
good.
There's somebody doing that full time.
Yeah, I'll help that keep it together. Well, continued success. Wish you the best in Austria, you and your wife, and I can't wait to hear the next chapter is going to bring. And continued success, my friend.
Yeah, thank you so much. Great talking to you, Jason.
All the best. A pleasure. Thank you for joining us on Music Matters with Jason Tramm. Please remember to smash that bell icon and subscribe to us for more information. We have great shows coming up, and thank you so much for being here. And remember, keep music alive.